All right, what do you got for number four, Jeff?
Let's see. All right. Well, I will actually take it one step further back and go to the Diano era. This is my one pick from that. It was close for me for two songs from this album. I'm kind of curious if the other one might show up from either of you. From Killers, I went with Purgatory, which I brought up in our sort of pre-discussion about this because technically it was a single. There's like an EP or a single or whatever, but it still feels like it belongs on this list because it was probably, it was not a hit. It was never, it was never a staple song. They only ever played it live, I think, in '81 or well, prior to the album coming out as well. Some of those Killer songs they played live prior to them ever being recorded. But yeah, I mean, the number one thing that most people praise the first two albums for is that sort of like raw punkish energy, and I think Purgatory does a really good job of like coupling that with some nice melodic guitar lines and chord progressions, and just it's a really cool song. Again, I mean, not like this was a real issue at that point in their career, but it's to the point. It's a shorter song. It's only a little over 3 minutes, I think. But yeah, I don't know. There's not. I don't have like an interesting tidbit or story about it or anything. I've just always really liked the song. I'm not the biggest fan of those first two albums compared to most other Maiden fans. I mean, I know that's sacrilege.
Session over.
But
roll the credits. We can edit that out.
That's not to say I don't like them. It's just that I don't rank either of the first two albums among their best work.
No, I get it. And for people that are younger, like, that came in at a different time with the band, I have heard that sentiment from people that came in around the Fear of the Dark or the Reunion era, that, the Diano era just doesn't do anything for them. It's too raw. It's too whatever.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind for like me and my personal taste is that like I'm not really a more I don't really do punk music really, and I'm not even really a big fan of a lot of like more getting on the like extreme end of metal or anything, so I'm more predispositioned to like things that are either like on the, like I said, on melodic, proggy, whatever. Nothing. Yeah. The main selling point of those albums is just not something that like is predispositioned to be something that like I'm really gonna love. But that being said, I do really appreciate the growth on Killers from the debut album between Martin Birch coming in and Adrian coming in, even though he didn't write on nothing on Killers, I don't think, from memory, was written by him, and he actually barely plays any solos on that record too. Like I think there's maybe only like 4 on the entire album, but because a lot of the songs only have one solo, and it's a Dave solo. So because I think it's because they were written for back then. Anyway, I should shut up. I go off on tangents really bad. So anyway,
no problem.
I would like to say that Purgatory is not on my list, but it's if I had done like my top 20 Maiden songs, Purgatory would have been on that list. I just think it's fantastic. It's a great song.
Cool. What do you got at number 4, Mattias?
I want to take my next pick is a song from my favorite album. It was the album that I heard the first. It was Peace of Mind. I was 9 years old, and I've listened to that. I think it's the album that I've listened to the most time of all albums. The song I picked from Peace of Mind is Sun and Steel. It's in a way it's a typical Maiden gallop, but it's not by Steve. It's an Adrian song. Like I said, there's a lot of Adrian songs on my list, and it's like he said to himself, "I want to do a Steve galloping Maiden rocker." and he just pulls it out of his hat. I think it's a really, really good song, but it's never been played live. Again, I can't understand why. If I was to pick more songs from that album, I would probably have picked Still Life or To Tame a Land, which are also very, very good songs. But I think this one is even more overlooked than those other two songs I mentioned.
And it has a huge chorus in it too that you could just totally picture working live. So
exactly, I was about to say that it's got that fist in the air kind of vibe to it with a great chorus. But again, it's just on an album like Peace of Mind, it's an album track. Put it on any other album, it would have been the single. But on Peace of Mind, it's just a throwaway song.
Yeah,
that's how good Peace of Mind is.
Yeah. All right, number 4 for me, we're going to go back to, we were talking about Killers, Prodigal Son. I like the acoustic guitar in it, and not that Maiden has never used acoustic guitar, but especially when the song kicks in, it's kind of like a strumming acoustic guitar that goes through the whole thing, which I think is not super, super common for Maiden. And at that time, it really kind of stood out to me when I heard it. It has kind of a different feel to it. It's got the "O Lamia" line in it, which I think is really cool. The bass is really great in it. Steve is just all over the place on that song, and I just think it's a cool song. I could have picked the other ones that you guys mentioned. It seems like that side 2 of Killers, the last couple songs on there are all kind of deepish type cuts, but I went for this one for the different feel and for the great bass playing on it.
Yeah, Prodigal Son was the other one that I said when I was between Purgatory and another. It was Prodigal Son, almost entirely because of Adrian's solo on it, which, like I said, he barely played many solos on Killers, but that one I think still to this day holds up as one of his very best that he recorded with Maiden. It just adds so much to the song. Also, I think the acoustic guitars and some of the lyrical subject matter and stuff on that is the typical. Steve talks a lot about how he's a big early Genesis fan, and there's a bit of that, I think, in like some of the lyrics and the acoustic guitar bits, and yeah, it's very different. It sticks out dramatically against the majority of that album.
Sure. All right, what do you got? I think we're at 3.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm disappointed that you didn't take the bait to continue with Peace of Mind, because we would have had 3 in a row then, because I'm going to do a different Peace of Mind song now. And I think it's a different one from, if I guess correctly, it's probably still a different one from the one you're going to talk about also. I went with Still Life. Again, I was very torn. I was very torn between Still Life and another song as well. And Peace of Mind actually has a couple songs that, like, in a sense, kind of fit the criteria of this list, but like they still feel wrong to pick. Like, for example, Where Eagles Dare has not been played live very much, in the course of Maiden's career. It's basically the Peace of Mind tour. They did it for a small portion of the Somewhere in Time tour. I think it made a brief appearance in like '93 on Bruce's last tour, and the early days tour, UK leg only, and most recently on the Legacy of the Beast tour, which is not very much for a song that's like that celebrated in their catalog. Also, Die With Your Boots On is another one that they've played live a decent amount, but it's not a single, and it's not like a song that really comes up as like a classic track very much, even though it's a favorite of mine. But anyway, Still Life. There is one reason why I picked Still Life over the other song, and that's because I have a fun story about it that I don't know if either of you would remember. As I said, the 3 of us have all been in the same room together back in 2010, or 20. No, it was 2011, when we, John, you guys had the Sinister Realm Crystal Eye album release show, I think it was. And me and my sister, our singer, Sarah, played an acoustic set on that show. And Mattias, you were there. We did an acoustic version of Still Life at that show. So I figured it was kind of a fun little, inside bit. But yeah, I don't really, it's again, it's like still, as Mattias already said, it's like Still Life, despite hardly ever being played live and being, very much the definition of, I guess, what would be considered a deep cut, it comes up a lot on lists when people discuss like most underrated or overlooked Maiden songs. So, I don't quite feel as strong of a need to defend it as I do some other songs, but no, it's really cool, as John and I were talking about on our call last night, you can hear bits and pieces of some of the things that got kind of out of control in later eras of the band, such as the slow intros, like the clean guitar bass type moody intros, and Still Life has a good example of that, but it really serves the song well. The chorus is kind of irregular, like it's kind of a weird vocal harmony arrangement, and there's almost like a weird seventh chord or something happening in the guitar line that makes it sound a little jarring. But yeah, it's cool. I also really love the last verse. It has this really sort of subtly complicated drum part going on with all these cool accents.
Yeah.
So yeah. Also, this is another good one for the end is really cool because it just completely just abruptly ends.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really cool. So.
Awesome. Mattias, your third pick.
This song is, if I was to pick one favorite song of Iron Maiden, I would pick this one. I just think it's so good I want to make love to it. It's a song called Total Eclipse. It was released as the B-side for Run to the Hills in Europe, and it was on non-European editions of Number of the Beast. It was a track on that one, but for us Europeans, this is a B-side, which is, how can a song as good as Total Eclipse be a B-side? That's just, it makes me angry. Well, I think it's one or two songs that Clive Berg get writing credit for. He wrote it along with Steve and Dave. It just has all the ingredients of what make Iron Maiden my favorite band. It has all the ingredients. It's a great solo. It's got, and just think about it. If Maiden were to write this song today, it's like 4.5 minutes or something. It would easily have been over 8 minutes. But when they were writing songs for Number of the Beast, they just kept it nice and tidy. So they kept, and it's just, I'm a bit, I don't know what to say. I just think it's a fantastic song. I don't know is it a deep cut, would you say?
Yeah, well, that wasn't on the American version of that album. I never heard that until the reissue came out.
Yeah, it only appeared on the album, I think, when they did the 1998 reissues on CD.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, it's funny. This is the age difference thing. It's like, I've always kind of known it that way because those 1998 remasters are like what I bought when I got into Maiden. Yeah. But the only reason I didn't pick Total Eclipse was because we didn't really discuss it specifically, and we had said no B-sides. And I went with the assumption, especially since you guys are older than me, that Total Eclipse would be considered a B-side. So I didn't.
I thought about clarifying that, but I thought, oh well, this is rock and roll. Rules are made to be broken. So
yeah, to me, it's a Maiden original. A regular Iron Maiden B-side would be a cover.
Yeah,
but this is like this is a proper Maiden song.
Yeah, that's why I'm waiting for somebody to say "Women in Uniform" on their list. No?
Why?
No. All right, so my number 3. Going to jump to the reunion era. The Legacy from Matter of Life and Death. That's the last song on the album, I think, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I love the way the synthesizer and the guitar in the beginning, towards the beginning, it's on that da 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 da. I just think the synths, the way they're blended in with guitar, just make it sound really, really epic. I love when the song drops out and the clean, dry guitar comes in, and it's kind of reminds me back to like kind of classic Maiden with the galloping style rhythms. And then at the end, when it sort of comes back to that theme, but much quieter, do 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 do, and it just ends on a big acoustic guitar chord. So I criticize the Return of Bruce era stuff a lot for being way too long, but that one works for me, and it's for me it's a great way to end a pretty epic album.
Yeah, we already touched on A Matter of Life and Death, but like I think that if I have to pick, I think it's actually the most underrated Maiden album, because I think it's very good. And this might be the age bias talking or whatever, but I really like pretty much every song on that one. And again, it's kind of dark, it's kind of proggy, you know, so I guess it makes sense that I like it a lot. But I mean, I could have picked a lot of songs from that album, because again, there's almost nothing from that album that really went on to be like, you know, a big hit or like a super celebrated song or anything. But yeah, I like the atmosphere of The Legacy a lot too. And again, big, like kind of like old school, like early 70s Genesis vibe with the acoustic guitar arrangements and stuff. It's very reminiscent of that kind of thing. It's also like a 9-minute song with no chorus. That song has no chorus.
But it moves. It moves for me pretty well. So.
Yeah.
I think if we're talking about Yannick, because it's one of his songs, it's he always has these great acoustic parts.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really good at adding those acoustic guitars and make them blend in, and I like that song a lot too. Again, it's this really heavy, laid back Nico style of drumming for the first half of the song, which is just gives me goosebumps.
Right on. All right, we're up to the last two. What do you got, Jeff?
All right, well, I was going to end on this next one, but I'm having second thoughts about maybe changing a song that I'm going to wait to the end, because I need to think it over while this goes around one more time. So I was going to end on this because in addition to it being a song that I think more or less fits the criteria for this list, it's one of my favorite Maiden songs, probably a top 10. And that's it. Mattias actually mentioned it earlier, Passchendaele from Dance of Death. Wasn't a single, was played live on the album tour. They played it for a very small number of shows in 2010 at the beginning of the US leg of the Final Frontier tour before dropping it. But there's two very specific things I want to touch on about this song. One, Maiden has a lot of war songs, obviously. You know, it's become a trope at this point that you know,
and songs about airplanes.
Yeah, especially if we're talking from like the Blaze era onward. You know, there's just a lot of songs about war, and most of them lyrically don't really do a lot for me. You know, I find them to usually be some of the more forgettable lyrics. They're usually Steve lyrics as well, so that probably doesn't help. I find Bruce to be a much better lyricist. But Passchendaele sits apart from a lot of them, I think, in that the lyrics really go to kind of a deeper level, that it sort of connects more with like the human element of being, you know, inside the mind of someone in a war zone, as opposed to just, you know, the typical kind of the Alexander the Great approach of like, this happened and then this happened and then this happened. It's like the song lyrics are like bullet points, basically. I've always found the lyrics to be a lot better, I think, than most of their other, war epics, so to speak. Also, similar to part of the reason why I like so many songs on A Matter of Life and Death so much, and some of the Final Frontier stuff, is that it's another longer, proggier, kind of moodier song that Adrian co-wrote. Yeah. A lot of these like longer, more epic war type songs are usually like Steve alone or Steve and Yannick songs or whatever. And since it is an Adrian song, I think you get a nice infusion of like what he brings to the table as a writer, with like the cool tapping figure in the beginning, and there's some cool riff breaks in the middle of the song that are all different from each other. The solos actually have some really interesting key changes between them too, which is not something you don't hear a lot of in the reunion era of Maiden, is that like they cycle through like a couple of different keys, like E minor, D minor, I think G sharp minor, C sharp minor. Like it's kind of musically very like exploratory by Maiden standards. And again, there's lots of cool like bridge parts that only happen once, and it's very not repetitive. It has a chorus that you do not get sick of either. Most of these longer Maiden epics in the reunion era, Steve will write those typical one-line choruses that just repeat over and over and over and over again, and you get sick of them by the end of the first one sometimes. But like Passchendaele's chorus only appears twice in the entire song, and it's not a one-line chorus, and you get a nice vocal harmony on the one at the end. And I also was my first Maiden show, again, age here, was the Dance of Death tour. They only did about 5 dates in the United States in support of that album. And they did a couple nights at an actually surprisingly intimate venue in New York City that only held, I think, like 3,500 or 4,000 people.
There. And the second night was canceled because somebody dropped the beer on the soundboard.
Yeah, they didn't get to do the encore the second night because of that. Right. And then the fourth night was canceled entirely because they double booked the venue or something to that effect. I was at the third of the what were supposed to be 4 shows, and I had no idea at the time, because like I don't think I'd ever even been to a concert that size, even like 3,500, 4,000 people. At that age, that was like honestly my first show, probably more than 1,000 or 2,000 people, and it seemed big, but in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I was extremely fortunate to get to see them in that kind of. And it's like I was pretty close, like not like on the rail or anything, but maybe about a half dozen rows of people deep back from the stage. And obviously it's just a very prominent memory in my mind, first Maiden show. And they did Passchendaele, and they staged it really nice too. It's like they had a lot of props and Bruce outfit and everything like that. So yeah, like I said, I was going to end on that because I think it's a better ending song for me, but I got to rethink my last choice while you guys go around again. So,
all right, good pick.
I think Passchendaele was actually Adrian's first Maiden epic, and I read an interview somewhere where he said that he just thought he would like to try to write one himself and see if he could pull it off. And yeah, he could. It's one of my. It's one of my favorite Maiden songs of all time. I think it's fantastic. Yeah, it's and like you said, there is a chorus, a great chorus, but it only appears twice in a 9-minute song. That's insane. But it's fantastic song.
Awesome. What do you got for number 2, Mattias?
Yeah, I'm going really deep. Maybe my deep cuts have been a bit shallow so far, but now we're going deep cut Maiden here. It's a song called Invasion. It's and importantly, it's the version with Clive Burr drums, which is also a B-side, but then again, it's a Maiden original song written by Iron Maiden. It was the B-side to Women in Uniform. And this song, why did I pick this song? Well, I just think it just makes me smile. It's just a sort of feel-good song for me. It's got loads of energy, and it just makes me smile. One of the points I want to talk about here is, and why I choose specifically the Women in Uniform version with Clive, is that what did Clive bring to Iron Maiden? What did he made? What was he bringing to Iron Maiden? And I would like to say that he made Iron Maiden more focused, harder, and faster. You can put it another way, that before Clive entered the band, they were a 70s band. If you listen to Soundhouse tapes, where you can find Invasion, and there are not a lot, but there's a few snippets of pre-Clive Burr songs floating around on the internet, where you can hear Doug Sampson playing drums, and I think even Thunderstick drummings. But like I said, when Clive came into Maiden, it's like a different band. And keep in mind that when they recorded the first album, he has just been in the band for a few weeks. A few weeks! I mean, that's insane. It sounds like he's been there from the start. It's I just think it's maybe it wouldn't make my top 50, but
as a deep cut.
But as a deep cut, it's definitely worth mentioning and exploring, and take the time to listen to the Women in Uniform version, and listen to the good as well version from Soundhouse tape. But like I've said now a million times, Clive really made Iron Maiden just burst out there.
That's a great one. I totally forgot about that. And I didn't realize that there were two different versions of it. So I'm going to have to check that out. Awesome. Okay, so my number 2, I'm shuffling around here because I want to see what you guys do on the last turnaround. From Bruce's first album when he came back, from Brave New World. For some reason, a lot of people don't like this song. I love this song, Nomad. I know it has a story behind it where they lifted some of the parts from another song, but I don't care. I love the song. I love the main riff in it. You know, it's got that sort of syncopated, aggressive riff, and I absolutely love the chorus, especially when Bruce goes up high, that "No Man." I just think that that's just Bruce at his best, that epic kind of Bruce, which I love. It's got the atmospheric kind of middle section, which with these nice layered guitars kind of coming in and out. And it's the third of my Murray Harris tunes that I picked. So I've always loved that song. And I was surprised that they never played it live. And I was always surprised that a lot of people don't like that song. So for me, it's a great old school style Iron Maiden epic.
I've always loved the middle section, which ironically is the part that caused all the controversy. But yeah, the like moody stuff with the orchestration and whatever. Like,
yeah, it's like really well orchestrated and layered and builds.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we're at the big one, number 1. What are you hitting us with, Jeff?
All right. Well, first I want to say that, 2 songs that were in the running for this that I chose to sort of pass on because they've already been touched on were Public Enemy number 1 and Brighter Than 1,000 Suns. But like I said, they were both songs that I... in addition to some of the other ones that were like runner-ups from any given album, those 2 were definitely like the first choice I had from each of those albums, but they were not high priority ones, so I was like, well, whatever. So I'm actually gonna go completely off of what would have been my next option, because I felt like in some sense like I needed to put something from the X Factor on here, because I do usually go to bat to defend the X Factor as being kind of like not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. I think there's a couple songs on the X Factor I really don't like, but there are a handful of tracks on there that I do happen to really like. So I almost went with Judgment of Heaven off of the X Factor, which is kind of a weird pick, I guess. But I'm actually going to go with a Matter of Life and Death song, even though we've already had a couple. I'm actually going to go to what would have been my next pick after Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, because as I've said, I just like that album a lot. I really like a lot of the songs on it. And I was somewhat reluctant to pick this one because it did recently make a reappearance in the live set list, even though I did not think that it would happen again. And that's For the Greater Good of God, which they brought out on the most recent tour, The Legacy of the Beast. Like I said, there's a couple of songs from Matter of Life and Death that I have a lot of love for, such as Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, and The Longest Day is another one. But For the Greater Good of God, it's hard to explain quite why I like it so much, because it does have a bunch of stuff in it that's all of sort of the go-to criticisms of a lot of the like Steve penned later Maiden tracks, where, you know, it's quiet intro, quiet outro, kind of repetitive one line type of chorus. You know, it has a lot of that stuff going on, but like at the same time, it's an example where I feel like I still enjoy it, and I think it still works. And I think that song is probably Steve's best lyrics in the last like 3 or 4 albums now. They're just, it's not even so much that I necessarily think that everything is like worded in some great way or anything, but I've always found the title of the song to be kind of clever, and the sentiment of the song to be kind of clever. You know, I don't want to get in like super deep here, but like, you know, my own relationship with like religion has always been kind of odd. I'm not a very religious person, and certainly very critical of a lot of things that organized religion does or causes in the world. And I find it kind of interesting that song is written from the perspective of someone who I believe does consider themselves like you know, at least somewhat religious person, that it's still kind of asking questions of, you know, is all of the horrible stuff done in the name of religion or in the name of God, or, you know, is it really worth it? Is it really like seeking some, you know, some better end or whatever? But you know, it's kind of I just think it's a good philosophical sort of premise of a song. And I love the middle section too, where they return to like sort of the bass part from the intro, the dun da da dun dun da da dun, and in the middle it's heavy, and it's like crushingly heavy, I think, in a way. Like there's a lot of that on A Matter of Life and Death. Brighter Than a Thousand Suns has a lot of that as well, where it's like it's a lot of these really kind of like lower E riffs, where it's like really just punchy and heavy in sort of a weird way for like contemporary Maiden, even though they're in these sort of like more epic songs or whatever. And, you know, then the part develops, I like the way like the drums change up like on the repeats of the guitar lines and stuff, which is cool. It makes it feel like that middle section really like develops, and there's a lot of movement and different stuff going on, as opposed to like, oh well, we just kind of repeated a part 8 times or whatever. You know, it's like every other time the drums change up or the guitar parts change up, or like the bass plays a different chord structure underneath the guitar line, or, you know, it's just, I think it's it's a very cool, dark, kind of underrated song. I was really glad that they brought it out again, so I'm gonna end on that.
Great pick.
Yeah, it was very surprising that they picked that song to play it again. I think the problem that you've already touched upon is the length of it's got that typical modern day Steve Harris kind of.
Yeah, it could have done without, you know, an extra verse and an extra, you know, chorus repeat and you know, some of that type of stuff.
Absolutely. I agree.
All right. But
apparently apparently Steve has a lot to say on the subject, so maybe that's why he has so many words he wants to get out there. Okay, and my last one. Unfortunately, no. I mean, John, great minds think alike. You've already mentioned Prodigal Son, which is, this might be an odd thing to say, but is it perhaps the most different song that Steve has ever written? I mean, there's so much about it that's just not Iron Maiden, but still it sounds like Iron Maiden. And I mean, are they inspired or what? I mean, the drumming, the guitar solos is, like you said, it's really top notch. Adrian's solo is just jaw-droppingly fantastic, and Steve's bass playing is also very inspired, and Paul's vocals is it really brings out something different from Paul's voice, which I really enjoy. And not just that, I think it's a song that makes the album better. It makes the album bigger. It's a different kind of song, and it just adds to. It would have been a poorer album without that type of song on it. I just love it. I think it's on my top 10 list of Maiden songs, Prodigal Son.
It's definitely very high on my list of songs that have grown on me exponentially over the years. It was a song that when I was young, getting into all these Maiden albums retroactively, like I didn't really think a lot of. And I think some of it is the lack of context. You know, it's like for the time, and also, for the type of album that Killers was outside of that song, you know, I don't think I like really quite appreciated it. It took more time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's an old song. It was written around 77, 78, and it was played live around that time. But I mean, I don't understand why it was not picked for the first one. I don't know. But apparently, I think they had Strange World and went with that one, a song which is even older, I think, than Prodigal Son. But Prodigal Son, yeah, it's one of my favorite ones, and check it out.
If I would have picked something off the debut, it would have been Strange World. I mean, it's really the only song on debut.
I almost picked that one too. Yeah, that you can almost really consider a deep cut.
Yeah, it's the only one that really qualifies. I guess Charlotte the Harlot would as well, I guess.
Yeah. All right, my number one. This wasn't. Go ahead.
I feel like I could probably guess.
Well, this wasn't on my list originally because I just assumed one of you guys is definitely going to pick this song.
And if it's what I think it is, I didn't pick it because I assumed you would.
All right. I can't believe that neither of you guys picked this one, but To Tame a Land from Peace of Mind. I just assumed that I originally had Quest for Fire, which is another one that I know you love, Jeff, on my list from Peace of Mind. But when I heard neither of you guys picked it, I was like, man, I got to throw this out there. So I don't have any prepared notes on it, but I mean, it may be a top 5 Maiden song of all time for me. Maybe one of their best epics. The that whole section is just epic. The song he is the king of all the land. The lyrics are great. I love when Bruce is spitting out a lot of lyrics. Like you can just tell he's handed this lyric sheet and he's trying to cram in all these lyrics, and he does it so well. He's so articulate. You can understand everything he says. The song just pounds along. It's just, oh man, it's just a absolutely great Iron Maiden song. The bass sounds great on it. The guitar solos are really cool. I guess it's kind of a long song. I didn't check because I didn't make any notes on this, but you know,
it's 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, and you think about the later Maiden stuff. My criticism of a lot of the later Maiden stuff is just that it's too long. But a song like To Tame a Land, that 7.5 minutes just goes right by because it's just so cool. And that verse riff is just so evil sounding and just so tight. Nico's drums, his hi-hat and everything. It's just an awesome song. So I had to put that up here on my list. And I think they did play that live though, didn't they? Just briefly a couple times?
Yeah, Peace of Mind tour.
Yeah, and it never came back after that. I mean, maybe it was just too many epics, too many long songs. I don't know. I don't know why that fell out. But to me, it's just an amazing Iron Maiden deep cut song.
I think they played it on the Canadian dates, but it got dropped when they entered the US or something. I like to think I have a tape of it recorded in like Washington State somewhere where they played that song, and I think that was the last time they played it. But yeah, I could easily have picked the song one. It's one of my favorite Maiden songs of all time. But I just went for Sun and Steel because it's more of a deep cut, pun intended.
Yeah.
And I also like to point out that the middle section, that do 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 do, is very much inspired by Isaac Albeniz, a Spanish guitar player. He has this song called Asturias. So if you Google Asturias and Albeniz, you will hear where Steve got the inspiration from that one. It's quite an old, I think it's from the 1900s, somewhere around.
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny. Like this was obviously, I went back and forth between Still Life and To Tame a Land a lot, and I waited to do, like, I did Still Life pretty late in my list because I was trying to wait it out, because I was trying to see if anyone would do To Tame a Land first. But I brought this up when we sort of like discussed everything in advance, that there's a handful of Maiden songs that definitely meet the overall criteria for this list, but at the same time don't quite feel like they belong, because even though they weren't singles and they weren't played live very much, whether it was one tour or a part of a tour or maybe two tours back in the 80s, or never in the case of some songs, you have a few particular songs from the classic period, like To Tame a Land or
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great. I would put Infinite Dreams in this category as well, which is why I didn't pick that, even though it's one of my favorite Maiden songs.
Loved by the fans, but they just never played it live very often.
Yeah, or hardly ever. Seventh Son or Rime of the Ancient Mariner would be in that general category as well. Like, but yeah, I don't feel the need to go to bat for them, to defend them, because any serious Maiden fan is usually on board with thinking that those songs are really strong, underrated songs. To Tame a Land also is another one that's in the category of, like, it took a while to grow on me. I'm not 100% sure why. Again, I think I got into Maiden so young, like before I had gotten around to hearing a lot of other music, and it's like certain things just were like the weird kind of like tonality of a lot of To Tame a Land seemed so foreign to like my 11-year-old ear, or however old I was at the time. The lyrics also were like, I had no idea at the time that it was based on Dune or what Dune was, and I just looked at these lyrics. I'm like, what the hell is this song about? So, like, it definitely took longer, but it's funny, much like Prodigal Son and some other songs that fall into that category. Like, I think the fact that it took longer to grow on me has led to me liking it a lot more now, because I got so burned out on certain Maiden songs that grabbed me right away, that it's like at this point in my fandom, I'm like, yeah, I love the song, but I'm a bit sick of it. Whereas it's like some of those other songs, I only came around to loving them years later. So it's like now they still feel, even though they're old songs, they feel a bit more fresh to me. Sure. And the one other thing I want to mention about To Tame a Land that I think is very important, this was the reason I was going to pick it, actually, was I did this whole sort of, I do a lot of dumb stuff like this because I'm, a big music nerd kind of guy, that like at one point a couple years ago, I kind of went on this long journey that took me quite a while, where I went through like basically like starting, I forget what year I started, sometime in the 70s. I started in the 70s and moved all the way through the 80s, and I basically listened to like as many albums as I possibly could that were like kind of on my radar, even ones I obviously like Maiden or whatever, like stuff I love and am familiar with, but I did it in relative chronological order. Not every album by release date, but like grouped by like, you know, release year at least, just to sort of kind of give myself, I think, a better, more developed perspective on like the development of, you know, hard rock and metal from through the 70s and 80s. And the thing that really, really stuck out to me about To Tame a Land, and I mean, Peace of Mind in general has a bit of this going on, but I think it's a really important milestone that gets kind of glossed over when talking about sort of the genesis of basically like what most people think of as progressive metal, because there isn't really a whole lot of anything that I would consider to be progressive metal that predates that. Some people will call like late 70s Rush progressive metal, but I don't really think of it that way. It's progressive rock to me. But it's like, the way I described it is, I don't think there was really anything as heavy as To Tame a Land that was as complicated as To Tame a Land, up to like that point, sort of in the general, you know, at least the surface level of like metal music development. If it was as or more complicated, it was not anywhere near as heavy. And if it was heavier or as heavy, it was not as complicated. And I think that that's reflected in the fact that like To Tame a Land has been covered by Dream Theater, you know?
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, that they did it as like some kind of a bonus track for something or whatever. It was about 10 years ago or so, I think. But yeah, like, and then literally within about a year of the release of Peace of Mind is when you started having this big boom of like Queensryche and Fate's Warning, and, you know, a lot of these bands that kind of are known as sort of like the original class of progressive metal bands. And it's like that, what Maiden was doing with stuff like that at that time period, I think was a very, very important stepping stone as far as marrying, you know, some of the progressive rock tendencies with like this more developing heaviness at the time.
Yeah, for sure. They don't get enough credit for their sort of influence in sort of the progressive, you know, progressive metal and even power metal, you know, type of thing. So, all right. I would like to thank my guests here today. This was a topic that we could dive really deep into, and we did. We could have made our lists much bigger. I think I'm going to have these guys back to talk more Iron Maiden, because as you can see from this video, we're very passionate and very knowledgeable. So I'd like to thank Jeff. I'd like to thank Mattias. Till we see you next time, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Leave some comments below. Let us know what your some of your favorite Iron Maiden deep cuts. What are they? Let us know what you thought of our picks. And like and subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of stuff. And until we see you next time, remember to stay heavy and stay metal. Thanks, guys.